After months of uncertainty, a turning point in the fight against COVID-19.
The scientific thing is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Help is on the way.
2 drug makers announced their vaccines are effective against the virus.
Our society needs hope, and this has given me a lot of hope.
Tonight, the people and Utah companies helping with the testing.
It makes us feel like we're doing something besides, sitting around worrying.
And once the FDA gives final approval,
it's very important that this vaccine is utilized the best we can.
The plans to get treatment into the hands of those who need it most.
Thank you for joining us for this Fox 13 News in-depth special report, COVID-19, the turning point. I'm Bob Evans.
And I'm Amy Nay. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll explore how we got to this point in developing a vaccine, what comes next, and what happens after people start to get vaccinated.
The latest numbers from Pfizer show its coronavirus vaccine is 95% effective. This week, Moderna also announced its vaccine appears to be 94.5% effective. The numbers allow both companies to seek emergency use authorization from the FDA.
With cases surging in Utah and across the country, we are learning more about the timetable for distributing a vaccine.
As reporter David Lee Miller explains, that could start as early as next month.
Public health officials have been banking on a vaccine to bring an end to the coronavirus outbreak. And on Friday, they got one big step closer. Drug maker Pfizer applying for FDA emergency use authorization for its vaccine, which according to trials is 95% effective. And if it goes well, Americans could start getting vaccinated as soon as the middle of next month.
What will happen is we will announce an FDA advisory committee date. We could literally be looking at authorization of this vaccine within weeks.
First in line for the vaccine, frontline healthcare workers and those considered high risk. The company says it plans to have 50 million doses available this year and 1.3 billion for next year. But ultimately, the timing of the rollout will be up to the FDA.
I don't want to speak for the regulatory agencies. I don't want to create neither pressure to them, and it's not appropriate. It is in their hands.
Meanwhile, the virus continues to rage with an average of about 150,000 new cases every day. State and local governments are implementing new restrictions to try and stop the spread. But they're taking a heavy toll on local businesses, many of which have been forced to close their doors after being deemed non-essential.
We're talking about 150,000 people that are going to be laid off, and we will have to lay off our staff again, coming up to Christmas. That's 150,000 families.
Secretary Azar says once approval for the vaccine is given, distribution will start within 24 hours. In New York, David Lee Miller, Fox News.
And while much of the attention so far has been on the positive results from Pfizer and Moderna, other drug makers are also developing treatments. Phase 2 trials show the vaccine being developed by the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca is safe. It has produced a similar immune response among older and younger people. Johnson & Johnson expects its vaccine to be ready by February. The company had to pause its Phase 3 trials in September due to a serious medical reaction in a patient.
Once the vaccines are approved, there is quite a process getting the shots to where they need to go.
We know that vaccines don't deliver themselves. It takes a team of people, it takes an entire immunization program to be able to receive a vaccine from the manufacturer and to make sure that the vaccine is kept in the right storage conditions and that it gets into the hands of healthcare providers who would administer that vaccine.
Now, here in Utah, the state health department outlined its distribution plans this week.
Most people won't get the vaccine until July, but the state could start receiving some doses as early as next month. Fox 13's Ben Winslow explains there will be a priority list.
It'll be in the phases and these waves, so that everybody kind of understands where they fall within this timeline.
Utah's Department of Health is rolling out its plans for distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine. Both Pfizer and Moderna have vaccines with strong efficacy, but vaccine distribution is going to go in waves, with people being prioritized. When the vaccine arrives in December or January, only a handful of hospitals will get it. They'll distribute it to healthcare workers and those on the front lines battling COVID-19. It will then go to long-term care facilities facility workers and other healthcare personnel. By February or March, long-term care facility residents could get it, and then high-risk essential workers. After that, it'll be available to the elderly, teachers, child care workers, those at a higher risk profession. People who can work from home will be the lowest priority. So when will it be available for everybody?
Based on how much vaccine all of Utahns could receive it in June, May, June, but I still feel confident about that all of Utahns could probably start receiving the vaccine in July timeframe.
It's promising news.
It was similar to a regular flu shot. I mean, there's some injection site pain and a little bit of fever and malaise, but short-lived and back to normal.
Representative Steve Elison is participating in the Moderna clinical trial for the COVID vaccine. He says it's 2 shots 28 days apart, and he now feels fine. What we don't know is how long it lasts.
I went in and got an antibody test several weeks after the second injection, and that came back positive. If it was above 1.1, it indicated you'd had the virus. Mine came back at 8.0.
Lawmakers are getting regular briefings on the pandemic, and they're encouraged by what's happening.
I'm very optimistic, and our society needs hope, and this has given me a lot of hope.
While this is all very good news, the state health department wants to temper it by reminding everyone this is a marathon, not a sprint to the finish line. Until a vaccine is widely available for everyone, COVID-19 is still in our communities, and people need to remember to wear face masks, limit social gatherings, physical distance, and of course, wash your hands. On the Hill, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
As we wait for a distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine, many doctors are already preparing for how they'll store it at the appropriate temperature. Some are spending thousands of dollars for a medical-grade freezer. The Moderna formula does not need deep freeze conditions, but Pfizer says its vaccine requires a very low storage temperature or it will spoil. That specialized equipment is now in very high demand.
Normal market, this sort of thing will be $11,000 to $15,000. The biggest problem is the wait list now. Our doctors' offices are having to wait anywhere between a month and 3 months to get these freezers because they're in such high demand.
Doctors say Pfizer is telling them the vaccine needs to be stored at minus 92 degrees. Once they get the freezers, they also have to certify it with state health leaders and the CDC. Once a vaccine is ready for distribution, you have to make sure people are willing to take it.
Before the most recent news about the vaccine effectiveness, Gallup Economics conducted a poll on what it would take for Americans to willingly take the shot. Reporter Jessica Perez digs into those numbers.
We decided to dig deep into why people are skeptical of the vaccine and see what pieces of information might make a difference in affecting their decision as to whether to get it or not.
Jonathan Rothwell, the principal economist at Gallup, says instead of a traditional Gallup poll with multiple choice or open-ended questions, the more than 5,000 people surveyed were broken into groups of 200. Each group was asked different questions, proposing various scenarios and hypotheticals about a vaccine.
Imagine that there's a vaccine that's going to be widely available in either, and then we varied the timing to be the end of this year or the beginning of next year. We also varied whether we disclosed it came after the Food and Drug Administration, did 3 rounds of clinical trials, or we just mentioned it was FDA approved.
People were also asked about how effective a vaccine would need to be and who would have to recommend it in order to take it.
What were some surprising things that you found as a result of this?
I'd say the most surprising thing was that telling people that the Food and Drug Administration approved the vaccine after 3 rounds of clinical trial had a slightly negative, not statistically significant effect relative to just telling them it's FDA approved.
The results also showed African Americans and Hispanics were more skeptical of a COVID-19 vaccine, and that most people wouldn't resume activities like going to the store without a mask, traveling, or sending their kids back to school just because a COVID-19 vaccine was available. Dr. Bali Pulendran, a professor of microbiology and immunology at Stanford University, says news about the high efficacy of 2 different COVID-19 vaccines is extremely positive, but he understands people's hesitations.
It's understandable because this is unprecedented. No one has developed vaccines at such warp speed. But again, it has to be driven by the data. And what the data shows us now is that at least in the short term, you have these vaccines that are in excess of 90% effective and safe.
Dr. Palendran says just because it took less than a year to develop an effective COVID-19 vaccine doesn't mean corners were cut to get there.
Methods used to make these vaccines have gone through the same high, rigorous standards that have always been used to make any number of other vaccines that have been administered and that have been proven to be safe and effective. So by that I mean they've gone through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 human trials. Multiple independent bodies have looked at the data.
Gallup hopes scientists, doctors, and politicians will use the results of this poll to help guide their messaging to the general public so that most people will be encouraged to get a COVID-19 vaccine when it becomes available. I'm Jessica Parrish reporting.
Even though you might not want a vaccine, some employers could require it. After the break, we ask a lawyer why your boss here in Utah could do just that.
You get to be cutting edge, part of what's coming and in development.
And meet the Utahns who had a front row seat to testing a COVID-19 vaccine. We'll be right back.
Right now, state leaders say they do not plan to issue a statewide COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
But FOX13's Sydney Glenn found out that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be required to get one. She spoke to a lawyer who says your employer could make you get vaccinated.
Will you or won't you? Something many people are discussing as the COVID-19 vaccine gets closer to approval. But will your job make the choice for you?
If you work in a place that has a lot of high-risk people or no high-risk people, the fact is, in Utah, the employer can still make it a condition of your employment.
The Utah Labor Commission says there are no statutes or rules regarding a requirement of vaccines by employers. This isn't new. For example, healthcare workers with the University of Utah Health are required to get a flu shot. Spencer Phillips, an employment lawyer, says he's anticipating many more companies wanting to require a COVID-19 vaccination.
I think that once the vaccine becomes widely available, I expect that lots of private employers will be requiring their employees to take the vaccine.
Phillips says while employers can require employees to get vaccinated, there must be exceptions.
If somebody has a disability or a sincerely held religious belief that prevents them from getting the vaccine, those are things that the employers need to look at very seriously.
If you don't fall into this category, Phillips says, you really wouldn't have any rights. But if you do have a true exception, employers must accommodate you, Phillips says.
It isn't just a no and that's the end of the story. The employer has an obligation to then look at accommodations. Maybe we can physically distance in the workplace. Maybe you can continue remote working. Maybe you can wear a mask or a face shield.
COVID-19 has brought many new rules and regulations, Phillips says. But as of today, Utah is an at-will state, and that includes allowing employers to mandate vaccines.
They could say you either get a vaccine or you don't have a job here anymore.
Phillips says we won't know just how many companies plan to mandate a vaccine until we have a better idea of when this will be available to everyone. He does say, though, companies are already discussing this. In Salt Lake City, Sydney Glenn, FOX13 News, Utah.
A Utah research company carried out some of the COVID-19 vaccine trials. FOX13's Lauren Steinbrecher shows us how J. Lewis Research in Salt Lake City got involved in a project with global impact.
The doctor here says that both Pfizer and Moderna wanted to look at a broad swatch of the population across the entire nation, including right here in Salt Lake City.
The Foothill Family Clinic looks like any normal doctor's office. Dr. James Peterson has this setup outside to test patients for COVID-19. At first glance, inside, you might not guess.
Just down the hall, we have offices dedicated to our research team.
This practice doubles as a J. Lewis research site for the future of medicine. The focus lately,
you get to be cutting edge, part of what's coming and in development.
Carrying out vaccine trials for COVID-19 by both Pfizer and Moderna. Dr. Peterson says the companies approached J. Lewis Research in Salt Lake City. From there, J. Lewis recruited more than 650 locals and administered either a vaccine or placebo, then collected data from participants. The companies recently announced the trials were so successful, they're confident the vaccine is closer to widespread distribution.
There's a cautious optimism that what we're doing is heading in the right direction. But you never know until the data comes out. Even though Utahns ended up a small percentage of the tens of thousands involved in both studies.
It makes us feel like we're doing something besides, sitting around worrying in our homes.
Khalida Ford, who took part in the Pfizer vaccine trial, says she was happy to pitch in and do her part to end this pandemic.
It's exciting. I thought, wow, we're helping with this. Yeah, it's working. Yay. Yeah, I was excited.
The study isn't over. Khalida's next appointment in March will test for antibodies. She's hopeful by then we'll have a vaccine. If so, Dr. Peterson knows part of this international effort took place right here at a Salt Lake City doctor's office.
The companies do pay participants to be in the study. Dr. Peterson says they're now looking for adolescents aged 12 to 17 for the next phase of Pfizer's vaccine trial. In Salt Lake City, Lauren Steinbrecher, FOX13 News, Utah.
Still ahead, itching to attend a live concert again? How getting vaccinated could be key. And how venues could check whether or not you are complying. That's still to come. Welcome back to this Fox 13 special. Now that the FDA is considering emergency use authorization for vaccines, what happens next? Experts say the FDA will now review data to confirm whether the vaccine is safe and whether or not it works. Then an FDA advisory committee of independent experts will review that data in December. A CDC advisory committee will also make recommendations about who should get vaccinated.
Once vaccines finally start arriving at hospitals and clinics, how will our lives change? Well, the answer is complicated. Even when the general population starts getting vaccinated, it'll be a while before restrictions are slowly pulled back. Dr. Todd Vento with Intermountain Healthcare says you'll need to get 2 doses, 3 or 4 weeks apart. Then wait another week for immunity to set in.
This concept of saying, when's the vaccine going to be available for everybody? Like, oh, good, it comes on July? Good, we're done. We don't have to do anything else. We get the vaccine. It's not quite like that. It's not the end of the road. We have to still gradually transition to get to that point of having more widespread immunity from vaccine.
Dr. Vento says the guidelines of wearing masks and social distancing could continue through next September.
With the pandemic dragging on, live music, well, it might feel like a thing of the past, but many venues and event organizers are now working on bringing ideas on how to bring it back to you sooner.
As Dan Grossman learned, that could include checking whether concert goers have received a vaccine.
Remember what it was like to wait online for concert ticket releases? Neither do I. It has literally been that long. Of all the changes COVID has brought to our lives, live events, whether it be sports or concerts at large venues like these, have essentially been non-existent. And if they do take place, it's with far fewer people watching. But Ticketmaster is working with venues to see how they can make scenes like these a reality again once a vaccine is put into play. Outside of already implemented concepts like contactless entry and socially distanced seating, Ticketmaster has suggested that venues ask fans for their vaccine status. Eventgoers could be assured other people around them have recently tested negative as well. It works like this. People would have to get a COVID test at a set time before the event, maybe a day or two. They would then upload proof of their results. A third-party healthcare provider would store the information and keep other details private, only assuring Ticketmaster that the person is good to attend. This whole vaccine confirmation idea isn't mandatory. It would be up to the discretion of each event organizer if they decide to go this route. But Ticketmaster says it could be a good way to boost revenue, as well as get people safely doing things that might feel like the old normal. I'm Dan Grossman reporting.
Well, we're all looking forward to that day when we can have live music back.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching this Fox 13 News special presentation, COVID-19, The Turning Point.
Quickcast is up next.